nephrons are in your kidney, and they are the functional and structural units of the kidney that actually do the work. So when we talk about nephrons, they are microscopic, and there are over 1 million of these nephrons per kidney. So they're microscopic, and there's like 1 million plus in each kidney. So when we talk about the nephrons, there's 2 major components. So 2 major parts, and then we're going to break them down into smaller parts. So the first part is what is called the renal corpuscle. And the renal corpuscle consists of 2 components. We have the glomerulus, and we have what is called the renal capsule, but it's also sometimes referred to as the Bowman's capsule. So we have the renal capsule. Let me just check this, what your textbook uses. The glomerular capsule. So this is called the glomerular capsule. This is also the Bowman's capsule. So that's after, obviously, the person that discovered this. So the glomerulus is where we have filtrate formation, and then the capsule is what captures it. So filtrate formation occurs here. This captures the filtrate and passes it to the renal tubule. So the renal tubule is what modifies the filtrate. So we have the renal corpuscle, and then we're going to talk about the renal tubule. So this is the modification of the filtrate. So the components of the renal tubule include the proximal convoluted tubule, and this can be abbreviated as PCT, proximal convoluted tubule. And then in some cases, we have what is called the loop of Henle. That's also a person's name. We're going to talk about the loop of Henle. And then we have the distal convoluted tubule, or the DCT. And then this drains into what is called the collecting duct. So this drains into a collecting duct. And there's actually more than one nephron connected to each of the collecting ducts. So let's look at what this looks like in a diagram. So here, this is actually where it is located, is in the renal cortex. So you remember the renal cortex histologically looks different than the renal medulla. So the cortex actually has the renal corpuscle. So here's the capsule around the glomerulus. So the glomerulus is a specialized capillary bed that produces the filtrate. The capsule catches it, and then it carries it into this renal tubule. So notice that it's convoluted, and meaning that it kind of goes like this. And proximal means that it is closest to the glomerulus. So if I'm looking at my diagram, the first part of my renal tubule before the loop of Henle is always going to be the proximal convoluted tubule. Then we have this loop of Henle coming down, and notice that this would be in the medulla. So remember that in the medulla, we had these pyramids. So part of those pyramids, the reason why they look like that is that they have, in many cases, these long loops of Henle, and they also have collecting ducts. So then we have the distal convoluted tubule, and then this goes into a collecting duct. And you'll notice that there is like more than one connection here. And so there would be more than one nephron draining the components into the collecting ducts. Now from the collecting ducts, remember that the urine is produced, it drips out of the minor calyx into the major calyx and then into the renal pelvis, and then it goes via the ureter to the bladder. And so this is the nephron, the structure of the nephron right here, and it does the filtration and then the modification of the filtration, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Now there's actually two types of nephrons in your body. About 85% of the nephrons are what are said to be cortical nephrons. So they are mainly located in the cortex. They do not have long loops of Henle. So these don't have long loops of Henle. And that means that they are not responsible for the production of very concentrated urine. So not responsible for production of concentrated, I'll just abbreviate that, urine. So the ones that are, which are actually very important, because as terrestrial organisms, we can live in places and consume far less water than, say, for example, if we were a freshwater animal. So even like if we were a beaver, for example, beavers produce very dilute urine. They produce a lot of urine. They're not very good at living in dry environments. They live in water, right? So, and close to water. And so we are more terrestrial than they are. So 25% of our nephrons are said to be juxta. That's a weird word, but it means next to. Juxta means next to medullary nephrons. So the juxtamedullary nephrons have long loops of Henle, have long hoops of Henle that extend down into their medulla. Okay, so they extend down into the medulla, so hence it's juxtamedullary. And they are, we'll talk about this, but they're what are responsible for helping to establish a gradient, a solute gradient, which is going to eventually suck water back out of the filtrate and allow us to be able to reabsorb it and produce very concentrated urine in our body. So let's see if I have a picture of those two types of neurons, or nephrons, not neurons. Okay, so here, this is my cortical nephron. Notice where this is. This is the boundary between the cortex and the medulla. So the glomerulus, and in this case, most of the tubule is found within the cortex. So this is my cortical nephron. This is my juxtamedullary nephron that has this long loop of Henle that extends down into the medulla. Now you might notice here it's actually kind of hard to see what is the proximal and what is the distal convoluted, but if you follow it, you can see this is the proximal, and then it goes down into the loop of Henle. So this would be my distal right here, convoluted, right, coming back up and connecting into the collecting duct. Now we can also see on this diagram, this is the paratubular capillaries. So around the tubules, we have what are called peritubular capillaries. That makes sense. Peri means around the tubule, And those are going to reabsorb some of the good stuff from the filtrate. And then look at this, we have this really weird, on the juxtamedullary nephrons, we have these really weird capillaries. This is actually what is referred to as the vasa recta. So it is the capillaries that surround the loop of Henle and help to create a concentration gradient that again is going to suck the water out of my loop of Henle and out of my collecting duct, so that I can reabsorb water if I need to conserve water because water is not plentiful. Okay, so that is the basic structure of the nephrons.